"Don't bring up marriage again. I don't want people thinking I'm settling," she told me. I thought we were building a future together, but when I proposed, she told me she didn't want people thinking she was settling for me. Hey everyone, before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button if you want more stories just like this. Thanks for the support. My name is Michael, and I was 28 years old when my world came crashing down around me. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the leaves crunch under your feet and the air smells of possibility. Jessica and I had been dating for 3 years, and in my mind, everything was perfect. We had met at a mutual friend's wedding, of all places, where she was a bridesmaid and I was one of the groomsmen. Our connection was immediate, like two puzzle pieces clicking into place. That evening, as I walked through the park where we had our first date, the velvet box felt heavy in my jacket pocket. I had planned every detail, the exact spot where we first admitted our feelings for each other, the string quartet playing softly in the distance, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I had rehearsed my speech for weeks, wanting every word to convey the depth of my love and commitment. Jessica arrived looking breathtaking in a simple red dress that brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. Her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, and when she smiled at me, I felt my heart swell with emotion. We walked hand in hand along the path, our conversation flowing easily as it always did. She spoke excitedly about her recent promotion at work, and I listened intently, proud of her accomplishments. When we reached the spot I had chosen, I signaled to the musicians hidden nearby, and soft strains of our song filled the air. Jessica's eyes widened in surprise and delight. This was it, the moment I had been dreaming of for months. I dropped to one knee, my hands trembling slightly as I opened the box to reveal the diamond ring I had spent months researching and saving for. The stone caught the last rays of sunlight, scattering tiny rainbows across Jessica's face. I began my speech, my voice thick with emotion as I recounted our journey together, from that first dance at the wedding to the quiet moments we shared in our apartment. As I reached the part where I asked her to marry me, I noticed something shift in her expression. The joy that had been there moments ago was replaced by something else, something I couldn't quite read. When I finished my speech and waited for her response, the silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't say yes or no. Instead, she asked me to stand up, her hand reaching for mine, but not quite making contact. The musicians continued to play, their music now feeling intrusive rather than romantic. She led me to a nearby bench, the velvet box still open in my hand. As we sat in the gathering darkness, she began to explain her thoughts on marriage, on our relationship, and on how she was perceived by others. Her words were gentle but firm, each one chipping away at the foundation I had so carefully built. What she said next would change everything between us, casting a shadow over our future that I couldn't have anticipated in my wildest dreams. The sun had completely set now, and the park lights flickered on, illuminating the tears that had begun to form in her eyes. She took a deep breath, and as she prepared to continue, I braced myself for words that would alter the course of our relationship forever. The weeks following that evening in the park were a strange limbo between what had been and what now was. Jessica and I continued to live together in our small apartment, but the air between us had changed, thick with unspoken words and avoided glances. The ring sat in its box on my dresser, a constant reminder of the rejection I still couldn't fully process. As I lay awake at night, Jessica sleeping peacefully beside me, I found myself replaying our entire relationship, searching for clues I might have missed. We had met when I was 25 and she was 26, both of us established in our careers and looking for something meaningful. I worked as a software developer for a tech startup, while Jessica was climbing the corporate ladder at a marketing firm. Our early dates had been filled with laughter and discovery. We stayed up until the early morning hours talking about everything and nothing, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. I learned that Jessica had grown up in a small town in the Midwest, the daughter of a teacher and a factory worker. She had been the first in her family to attend college, graduating with honors before moving to the city for her career. Jessica's ambition was one of the things I admired most about her. She worked tirelessly, often putting in long hours at the office, yet always made time for our relationship. She supported my career change from a larger corporation to the startup, encouraging me to take the risk when I had doubts. We celebrated each other's successes and provided comfort during setbacks. After about a year of dating, we decided to move in together. Our apartment was small but cozy, filled with a mix of my practical furniture and her eclectic decor. We fell into a comfortable routine, sharing household responsibilities and creating our own little world away from the pressures of work and family. Jessica's family had been welcoming from the beginning. Her parents visited occasionally, treating me like one of their own. Her younger sister, who lived in the same city, often joined us for dinner or movies. I felt like I was becoming part of their family, and I hoped that one day we would make it official. My own family, though living across the country, had embraced Jessica through video calls and holiday visits. My mother especially seemed taken with her, often asking when we might make our relationship permanent. I would always deflect these questions, not wanting to pressure Jessica, but secretly hoping that marriage was in our future. The signs had all seemed positive. Jessica talked about our future together, vacations we would take, the kind of home we might one day buy, even how we would raise children. She had once pointed out a ring in a store window that she liked, though I didn't think much of it at the time. When my cousin got married, Jessica had been enthusiastic about helping with the planning, offering suggestions and compliments about the ceremony. So when she rejected my proposal with those words about not wanting people to think she was settling, I was blindsided. In the weeks that followed, I tried to understand where this sentiment had come from. Was it something about me, something about our relationship, or was it about her own insecurities and how she perceived herself in the eyes of others? Jessica's behavior after the proposal became increasingly confusing. She was more attentive than ever, cooking my favorite meals, planning weekend activities, and initiating intimate moments. Yet whenever I tried to discuss the future or our relationship status, she would deflect or change the subject. It was as if she wanted everything to remain exactly as it was, without the formal commitment of marriage. I began to notice small changes in how Jessica presented herself and our relationship to others. At social gatherings, she would introduce me as her friend Michael rather than her boyfriend. When colleagues asked about her relationship status, she would describe it vaguely as complicated or taking things slow. These observations troubled me deeply, suggesting that her concern about how others perceived our relationship went beyond just the question of marriage. One evening, as we were getting ready to attend a work event of hers, I found myself watching Jessica as she applied makeup and selected her outfit. She was putting more effort into her appearance than usual, and I wondered if it was related to her comment about not wanting people to think she was settling. The thought left me with a hollow feeling in my chest, a growing sense that there was something fundamental about our relationship that I had misunderstood. The invitation to Jessica's 10-year high school reunion arrived on a Tuesday, slipped into our mailbox along with bills and junk mail. Jessica opened it while I was making dinner, her expression unreadable as she read the details. When she mentioned the event to me, her tone was casual, almost dismissive, as if it were just another item on her social calendar. "It's next month," she said, tucking the invitation into a drawer. "We should go. It'll be fun to show everyone how far I've come." Something in her choice of words struck me as odd, how she said "I've come" rather than "we've come." It was a small distinction, but it aligned with a pattern I had been noticing since my failed proposal. Jessica often spoke about her accomplishments and life trajectory as if she were traveling alone, even when I had been right there beside her, supporting her every step of the way. As the reunion approached, Jessica's behavior grew more peculiar. She began researching former classmates on social media, making comments about who had succeeded and who hadn't. She started a new fitness regimen, waking at dawn for runs before work. She even mentioned updating her professional headshots, explaining that she wanted to look her best when reconnecting with people from her past. I tried to be supportive, encouraging her efforts and complimenting her on her dedication, but beneath the surface, I felt a growing unease. It was as if she were preparing for some kind of performance, with me as her supporting actor rather than her leading man. The night of the reunion, Jessica spent hours getting ready. She chose an elegant dress that showed off her toned figure, and her makeup was flawless. When she finally emerged from the bathroom, she looked stunning, but there was a distance in her eyes that I couldn't quite penetrate. "You look amazing," I told her, meaning it sincerely. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks, I want to make a good impression." The reunion was held in a banquet hall at a hotel downtown, decorated with banners from their high school and old photographs of the graduating class. As we entered, Jessica's eyes scanned the room, her expression shifting as she recognized former classmates. She seemed to be cataloging their appearances, their successes, their failures. Throughout the evening, I watched as Jessica navigated the room with practiced ease. She greeted former teachers with respect, caught up with old friends, and politely acknowledged those she hadn't particularly liked. But I noticed something troubling in these interactions, how she positioned herself in relation to me. When introducing me to people, she would often say, "This is Michael," without any further clarification of our relationship. When someone asked directly how we knew each other, she would reply vaguely, "We met through work," or "We have mutual friends." The omission of our 3-year relationship felt intentional, deliberate. What bothered me most was how differently she behaved around certain people. When speaking with former classmates who had achieved notable success, doctors, lawyers, business owners, she would position herself closer to me, sometimes touching my arm or leaning against me as if to signal that she too had done well for herself. But when interacting with those who seemed less successful, she created physical distance between us, as if not wanting to be associated with their perceived failures. The evening reached an uncomfortable climax when we encountered Jessica's high school boyfriend, a man named Brian who now worked as a financial advisor. Their conversation was filled with reminiscences and inside jokes from their past, with me standing awkwardly to the side. When Brian asked about our relationship, Jessica hesitated for a moment before saying, "Michael and I have been seeing each other for a while." The phrase "seeing each other" struck me as deliberately casual, minimizing the significance of our 3-year relationship and the life we had built together. It was as if she were keeping her options open, not wanting to appear too committed in front of her former flame. On the drive home, the silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. I wanted to ask why she had presented our relationship so casually, why she had seemed ashamed or embarrassed to acknowledge the depth of our connection. But I was afraid of what she might say, afraid that her answer would confirm my growing fears about her true feelings. When we arrived back at our apartment, Jessica seemed energized by the evening, recounting stories about her former classmates with excitement. She didn't seem to notice my quietness or the questions building inside me. As she continued talking, I realized that the reunion hadn't been about reconnecting with old friends for her. It had been about proving something, about demonstrating that she had succeeded in life. The question that kept echoing in my mind was whether, in her quest to prove her success to others, she saw me as an asset or a liability. And more importantly, whether her concern about not settling had less to do with our relationship itself and more to do with how that relationship positioned her in the social hierarchy she seemed so desperate to climb. The weeks following the high school reunion brought a subtle but significant shift in our relationship dynamic. Jessica became more distant, spending longer hours at work and coming home later than usual. When I asked about her increased workload, she would offer vague explanations about important projects and upcoming deadlines. Though I tried to be understanding, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. I began to notice changes in Jessica's social media presence as well. She started posting more frequently, sharing carefully curated images of her life that highlighted her professional achievements and social activities. What struck me was how rarely I appeared in these posts, and when I did, it was always in group settings where my role in her life was ambiguous. It was as if she were crafting an image of herself as a successful, independent woman, unencumbered by a serious relationship. One evening, as we were having dinner, Jessica mentioned that she had joined a professional networking organization. She spoke enthusiastically about the opportunities it would provide for career advancement and making connections with influential people. When I asked if I could attend some of the events with her, she hesitated before explaining that it was really more focused on individual networking. The organization did seem to open new doors for Jessica. She began attending exclusive events and parties, often coming home with stories about the important people she had met. She would name-drop CEOs, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders, her eyes shining with excitement as she described these encounters. I listened, trying to be supportive, but couldn't help feeling that she was moving in circles where I didn't quite fit. Jessica's transformation became more pronounced as she adopted the mannerisms and speech patterns of the people in her new social circle. She began using industry jargon and corporate buzzwords even in our personal conversations. Her taste in music, restaurant, and even clothing began to shift, aligning more with what seemed popular among her new associates. What troubled me most was how she spoke about her future. Where once she had talked about our plans and dreams, she now referred to my career trajectory and my goals. The language was subtle but significant, suggesting a shift from a shared journey to an individual path on which I was merely a passenger. The first real test of our new dynamic came when Jessica's company announced their annual gala, a black tie event celebrating the year's successes. Jessica had been nominated for an award, and she was thrilled about the recognition. As the date approached, her excitement grew, along with her anxiety about making the right impression. "I need to look perfect," she told me one evening as we discussed outfits for the event. "The CEO will be there, along with some important clients and industry leaders. This could be a big opportunity for me." I suggested we go shopping together for something new for her to wear, but she declined, explaining that she wanted to shop with a friend who had a better sense of formal fashion. The rejection stung more than I expected, but I tried to push it aside, telling myself that she was just focused on her career. The night of the gala, Jessica was breathtaking in an elegant gown that showed off her figure without being too revealing. She had clearly invested significant time and effort into her appearance, from her professionally styled hair to her perfectly applied makeup. As we prepared to leave, she gave me a critical look. "Maybe you should wear a different tie," she suggested, her tone casual but her expression serious. "This one doesn't quite match the formality of the event." Though her words weren't unkind, they carried a message that was becoming increasingly familiar. I needed to fit into her world, to enhance rather than detract from the image she was trying to project. The gala was held in a grand ballroom at a luxury hotel, filled with elegantly dressed people mingling beneath crystal chandeliers. Jessica immediately seemed in her element, greeting colleagues and superiors with practiced charm and confidence. I followed behind her, feeling increasingly out of place among the powerful and successful people who populated the room. As the evening progressed, I watched as Jessica navigate the social dynamics with skill. She laughed at her boss's jokes, engaged clients in discussions about industry trends, and made herself visible to the company's executives. I stood by her side, but often felt invisible, as if I were merely an accessory to her professional performance. The most painful moment came when the CEO approached our table. Jessica's demeanor changed instantly, becoming even more attentive and charming. When he asked about me, she introduced me as Michael, a friend, rather than her boyfriend or partner. The casual omission felt like a physical blow, and I struggled to maintain a neutral expression as they continued their conversation. Later that evening, when Jessica received her award, she gave a polished acceptance speech that thanked everyone who had contributed to her success, her mentors, her colleagues, her family. But she made no mention of me, no acknowledgement of the role I had played in supporting her career or the life we had built together. On the drive home, Jessica was still buzzing with excitement from her success. She talked about the people she had met, the connections she had made, and the opportunities that might arise from the evening. She didn't seem to notice my silence or the questions building inside me. When we arrived back at our apartment, I finally found the courage to ask what had been bothering me all evening. I asked why she had introduced me as just a friend, why she hadn't mentioned me in her acceptance speech, why it seemed like she was trying to distance herself from our relationship in professional settings. Jessica's response was careful, measured. She explained that in corporate environments, it was often better to keep one's personal life private, that she didn't want people making assumptions about her based on her relationship status. She spoke about the importance of being taken seriously as a professional, about not wanting her accomplishments to be overshadowed by her personal life. As I listened to her explanation, I realized that her concern about not settling went deeper than I had initially understood. It wasn't just about marriage, it was about how our relationship fit into the carefully constructed image of herself she was presenting to the world. And I was beginning to fear that, in that image, I was becoming an inconvenient detail rather than a central feature. The confrontation in our apartment that night opened a door that couldn't be closed again. Once the questions had been voiced, they demanded answers, and Jessica could no longer deflect or avoid them. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations, each one peeling back another layer of the complex dynamics that had been developing in our relationship. Jessica's initial explanation about maintaining professionalism in corporate settings seemed reasonable on the surface, but as we talked more deeply, it became clear that her concerns went beyond workplace politics. She admitted that she had been deliberately crafting an image of herself as a successful, independent woman, and that in that narrative, a serious relationship complicated the story she wanted to tell. People make assumptions, she explained one evening as we sat on our couch, the space between us feeling wider than ever. When they see a woman in a serious relationship, especially marriage, they start thinking about her priorities. They wonder if she's as committed to her career, if she might be planning to start a family soon. I worked too hard to get where I am to have people questioning my dedication. I listened, trying to understand her perspective while grappling with the hurt her words caused. But we're a team, I countered. Your success is my success. Why does it have to be one or the other? Jessica sighed, running a hand through her hair in a gesture of frustration. It's not that simple. In my industry, perception matters. The people who make decisions about promotions and opportunities, they have their own biases, whether they admit them or not. I've seen women get passed over because their bosses assumed they wouldn't be as committed once they got married or had kids. Her explanation made sense on a rational level, but it didn't address the deeper issue, how she saw me and our relationship in the context of her life and ambitions. The more we talked, the more I realized that Jessica didn't view our relationship as an equal partnership that enhanced her life, but rather as a potential liability that might hinder her progress. This realization became even clearer when Jessica mentioned that she had been reconnecting with someone from her past. She tried to frame it casually, as if it were just a coincidence, but I could hear the defensiveness in her voice. "Brian, my high school boyfriend, we've been talking a bit," she said, avoiding eye contact. "He's doing really well for himself, works in finance now. We have a lot in common, obviously, with our backgrounds and everything." The mention of her high school boyfriend, the same man she had seemed so eager to impress at the reunion, sent a chill through me. "What kind of talking?" I asked, my voice tight with tension. "Just texting, mostly. Catching up," she replied, her tone too casual to be convincing. "He's in town next month. We might get together for coffee." The conversation ended there, with Jessica retreating into silence and me left to grapple with the implications of what she had revealed. The following weeks were strained, with both of us avoiding the topic of Brian and what his reemergence in Jessica's life might mean for our relationship. I tried to give Jessica space, hoping that she would come to her senses about the value of what we had built together. But her behavior continued to trouble me. She became more secretive with her phone, often turning it away when I entered the room. She started going out more frequently, citing work events or meetings with friends, though she offered few details about these activities. The breaking point came when I discovered that Jessica had been meeting with Brian behind my back. I found a receipt in her purse for dinner at an expensive restaurant, dated on a night when she had told me she was working late. When I confronted her with the evidence, she initially tried to deny it, then became defensive when pressed for details. "It's not what you think," she insisted, her voice rising with frustration. "We're just friends catching up. There's nothing going on between us." But her explanation rang hollow, especially when I noticed the new clothes and jewelry she had been buying, the extra attention she was paying to her appearance, even on days when she claimed to be working from home. It was becoming increasingly clear that Jessica was exploring other options, testing the waters of a life without me. The realization that Jessica might be considering leaving me was devastating, but it also forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about our relationship. I had been so focused on what I wanted, marriage, a family, a shared future, that I had failed to see how differently Jessica viewed our path together. I began to understand that Jessica's comment about not settling wasn't just about marriage or how others perceived our relationship. It was about her own perception of whether I was the right partner for the life she envisioned. And as I looked at our relationship through her eyes, I could see how, in her quest for success and status, I might seem like an obstacle rather than an asset. This understanding didn't make the situation any less painful, but it did provide a clarity that had been missing. Jessica and I wanted different things, or at least we wanted them for different reasons. She wanted success and recognition, and she was willing to sacrifice our relationship to achieve them. I wanted a partnership built on mutual support and shared dreams, a life where we celebrated each other's successes without keeping score. The final conversation happened on a rainy Sunday afternoon, the gray light outside matching the mood in our apartment. We sat across from each other at our kitchen table, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. "I think we need some time apart," Jessica began, her voice soft but firm. "I need to figure out what I really want without the pressure of our relationship influencing my decisions." I nodded, having expected this outcome, but still feeling the weight of her words. "And what if you decide that you don't want this relationship anymore?" Jessica hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. "Then we'll have to accept that and move on. But I can't make any promises right now. I need to focus on my career, on becoming the person I want to be." As we sat in the quiet of our apartment, with the rain tapping against the windows, I realized that our relationship had reached its end. Not with a dramatic confrontation or a clear betrayal, but with the slow erosion of the foundation we had built, replaced by diverging paths and incompatible dreams. The weeks following our separation were a blur of painful realizations and difficult adjustments. Jessica moved out of our apartment, taking with her the life we had built together piece by piece. Each empty space she left behind was a reminder of what we had lost, not just the physical objects, but the shared dreams and future plans that had once seemed so certain. I found myself replaying our relationship, searching for the moment when things had started to go wrong. Had I missed the signs? Had I been too focused on my own vision of our future to see that Jessica's dreams were taking her in a different direction? The questions haunted me, each one a small accusation against my own perception and judgment. What hurt most was the realization that Jessica's concern about not settling had less to do with me as a person and more to do with how our relationship fit into the narrative of success she was trying to construct. In her quest to prove her worth to the world, she had measured her value by external markers: career advancement, social status, the approval of influential people. And in that equation, I had become a variable she couldn't control, a factor that might complicate rather than enhance her image. The irony was that I had always seen Jessica's success as our success. I had celebrated her promotions, supported her career decisions, and taken pride in her accomplishments. I had never viewed her ambitions as a threat to our relationship, but rather as part of the journey we were taking together. The fact that she couldn't see our relationship in the same way was the most painful realization of all. As the months passed, I began to rebuild my life without Jessica. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the logical world of code and systems. I reconnected with friends who had been neglected during my relationship, rediscovering parts of myself that had been subsumed by our life together. I even started dating again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as I learned to envision a future that didn't include Jessica. Through it all, I followed Jessica's life from a distance, through social media updates and mutual friends. She continued to climb the corporate ladder, her posts filled with images of success, business trips, industry events, meetings with important people. I noticed that Brian, her high school boyfriend, began appearing in her photos, their relationship status ambiguous, but their connection undeniable. A year after our separation, I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop near our old apartment. She looked the same, yet different, more polished, more self-assured, but with a hint of something I couldn't quite read in her eyes. We exchanged pleasantries, our conversation stilted but not unfriendly. "I heard you got a promotion," I said, genuinely happy for her success despite everything that had happened between us. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, senior director now. It's been a lot of work, but worth it." "How's Brian?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "We're engaged," she replied, her hand automatically going to the diamond ring on her finger. "We're planning a wedding for next spring." I nodded, feeling a pang of something, not quite jealousy, not quite regret, but a complex emotion that acknowledged the paths our lives had taken. "Congratulations, I'm happy for you." As we stood there, the silence between us filled with all the words we had never said, I realized that Jessica had found what she thought she wanted: the success, the status, the partner who fit into the image she had constructed of her life. Whether she was truly happy was another question, one I couldn't answer and had no right to ask. The encounter left me with a final, clearer understanding of our relationship and its demise. Jessica hadn't been rejecting me specifically when she said she didn't want people thinking she was settling. She had been rejecting the idea that her worth could be measured by anything other than her own achievements and the approval of those she deemed important. In her quest for success, she had viewed our relationship through the lens of how it served her ambitions, rather than as a partnership that enhanced both our lives. As I walked away from the coffee shop, I felt a sense of closure that had been missing until now. Our relationship had ended not because we didn't love each other, but because we loved different things. Jessica loved the idea of success and status, while I loved the idea of partnership and shared dreams. Neither was wrong, but they were incompatible, leading us down different paths to different futures. In the end, Jessica's comment about not settling wasn't about me at all. It was about her own fears and insecurities, her need to prove her worth to the world. And while I wished her happiness, I was grateful that our separation had led me to a clearer understanding of what I truly wanted in life and in a partner. Someone who saw our relationship not as a stepping stone to individual success, but as a foundation for shared happiness. The ring I had given her that autumn evening in the park remained in its box on my dresser, a reminder of the love we had shared and the dreams that had diverged. But as I moved forward with my life, I found that the memory of our relationship no longer brought pain, but rather a bittersweet understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go when your paths no longer align.